Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of August of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the most important, probably the most interesting updates are coming from Kupiansk front line, from Kupiansk area. The previous video we have already discussed that the general of Ukraine, Syrsky, the general and the commander of infantry army of Ukraine, have visited the settlement today, and this person is responsible for the defense operation of Bakhmut when the Bakhmut was Bakhmut but not Artyomovsk. This person is also responsible for the operation in Debaltsevo in 2014. So this is a very famous honorable general of Ukraine, and he was sent to Kupiansk to start defense operation of that settlement as well. At least the sources reported like that. Furthermore, the local administration, local authorities reported and announced about massive and total evacuation of civilians from this settlement. And I remind you that Kupiansk used to be the capital of Kharkiv, let's say Kharkiv area, while the Russians were in that region. Furthermore, the Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians have accumulated significant number of forces in this area. A few weeks ago, there were reports that the Russians have accumulated around 100,000 soldiers for penetration operation, and today the Ukrainians also reported and confirmed that in the vicinity of Kupiansk, the Russians have accumulated and created penetration feast that the Russians will try to use to collapse the Ukrainian front line, to collapse the Ukrainian combat line, and to capture significant number of square meters of territory in this area. Furthermore, today we got update, at least the first confirmation, that as a result of fierce fightings in the vicinity of Sinkovka, this report we got somewhere at 6 p.m. of the local time, the Russians entered the settlement. Currently we haven't received any video or photo confirmation of that, but the Russians entered the settlement. And the thing is that a few hours later, maybe an hour and a half later, we got a very interesting update from the Ukrainian side that the Ukrainians reported that they refuse to go to take their positions. So basically, Sinkovka is not a very big settlement. There is just few streets, and you can't hold a lot of forces at the same time in the same area. You can keep, let's say, when talking about Sinkovka, probably up to half a battalion of forces at once, at the same time. Because if you have more forces, that means that your level of loss will be increased because of fire of guided bombs, missiles and strikes. So you need to stretch forces and to keep, let's say, 2 people per 10 square meters. And as I understand, as a result of fierce fightings, as a result of storming operation, artillery strikes, the Russians managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt, to destroy the first waves of Ukrainian forces and fortifications, and basically they entered the settlement. And according to the military science, in this moment, the Ukrainian forces should have sent the reserves. And the Ukrainians probably made an attempt to send some Ukrainian forces in that settlement to stop the collapsing on the front line, but the forces of 1492nd Mechanized Brigade refused to follow the orders and to take their positions. So this is the situation in this area. And I'll remind you, every time when Ukrainian forces, this or that platoon, brigade or battalion, refuse to take their positions, in a day the positions were captured by the Russian forces. Furthermore, I'll remind you that this area was visited by the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, Shoigu. He personally inspected this area, trying to understand the situation in this area, and probably he gave the final orders before the beginning of this greatest offensive operation in Kupiansk area. Furthermore, today the Russian sources published very interesting videos of convoys of artillery systems that were heading in direction of special military operation. Probably this convoy of artillery systems with additional defense on top of these systems were heading in direction of Kupiansk. These are newly created artillery systems just were took off from the production line or something like this. Furthermore, as we discussed, so we got some update that the Russians entered Sinkovka and the Ukrainians refused to send reserves. So basically the Ukrainians took a decision, or at least those forces in the back took a decision to not to leave their positions in Kupiansk and Petropavlovka. As I understand, Syrsky visited Kupiansk, and probably maybe the Ukrainians and local commanders were planning to send reserves in that settlement, but Syrsky, he had a lot of experience in Bakhmut, and he's very experienced. Probably that was his decision not to send forces and to try to create defense belt, a defense line in the vicinity of Kupinsk, but not in the villages around the settlement. So basically he just didn't want to repeat the stories of Klishchievka and many other small settlements when the Ukrainians were sending waves and hundreds and thousands of soldiers trying to hold control over some few buildings and trenches and probably brushes and so on. And during those events, political events, mainly the Ukrainians lost significant number of forces. And now Syrsky took a decision not to do this, but to hold the line inside the settlement and to save as much possible. So basically, by this event, by this piece of news, we understand that Ukrainians took a decision to step back from the settlement in direction of the main heart, in direction of the main fortress, and to try to defend this area from the south, from the town, from inside of the town. Furthermore, yesterday we got update that the Russians were able to maintain the gap and to take more checkpoints in the strongholds in the fields between Sinkovka, let's say, and Yahidne. The Russians were attacking to the south using the broad front line tactic, and they captured more strongholds and so on. And on this direction, the Russians are using tank forces, armored vehicles, and of course reconnaissance teams. And as we discussed yesterday, there were some updates that the Russians started attacking in direction of the small settlement Ivanovka from Yahidne. For now, we yet haven't received any updates about that, just the Minister of Defense reported about some activities in this area. When talking about Russian artillery forces, today we got at least 2 geolocated confirmations how the Russians managed to discover and to destroy some positions, at least of 14th Mechanized Brigade in the settlement by the name of Peshchane. This is the area of, this is the Ukrainian track that were, let's say, bringing some supply and support. The Russians discovered that positions and destroyed, trying to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities and capabilities in defense. Furthermore, the Russians published another video of another destroyed position of Ukrainian forces. On this area, the Russians reported they managed, by the D-30 howitzer, the Russians managed to discover Ukrainian stronghold and just to attack. Of course, we see a very big smoke. Probably this is the results of detonating of munition in some local operational ammo depot. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce fightings in this area, the Ukrainians lost 75 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, 1 Raider INT-PQ-50. And also the Russians managed to repel at least 6 attacks, 6 counterattacks that were Ukrainians trying to implement. And I'll remind you that when talking about the Ukrainians during the previous months, they have accumulated significant number of forces. There are 3rd Tank Brigade with a warrior on the shield. There is 105th Defense Brigade, 101st Defense Brigade with a bear on the shield. There is 88th Mechanized Brigade that was created, strategical brigade from strategical reserves that was trained by the Western countries. There is a 14th Mechanized Brigade that have been located here probably since the autumn of the previous year. There is a 43rd Mechanized Brigade from Strategical Reserves. There is a 32nd Mechanized Brigade from Strategical Reserves. So as you can see, a lot of, around 50% of the forces that are currently located in this area are from Strategical Reserves, and just another half is from the old forces, old Ukrainian forces with old Soviet weapon. So we'll follow the situation, because situation is getting critical, and if we increase the number of updates that we receive from this bridgehead, we see that the Russians were heavily concentrated trying to bomb and shell suppress the Ukrainian artillery. When talking about the Ukrainians, we also see their main targets. The Ukrainians were trying to suppress the Russian forces in the forest between Liman Первый and Tavlazhanka, and of course in the vicinity of Novoselovskaya. Very interesting and very critical situation for the Ukrainians. Now we're moving to the south, to Liman area. We haven't received many updates from this territory, just artillery duels, regular shellings and so on, and the level of losses is not so heavy in comparison with some previous days. The Russians reported that as a result of artillery duels in this area, the Ukrainians lost 80 soldiers and 5 armored vehicles. The Russians managed to repel 2 attacks from the Ukrainian side. We haven't received almost nothing from the Severus bridgehead, and now we're moving to the Artyom Artyomovsk area or Bakhmut front line. Today we got a lot of updates, and the main updates currently are coming from the southern area, from the bridgehead between Kurdyumovka and Klishchievka and Andreevka. So these are three main settlements that the Russians try to base their defense in this area. If you remember, a few days ago the Ukrainians launched offensive operation. They sent significant number of forces trying to penetrate the defense belt and to establish control over Andreevka. So basically the Ukrainians were trying to make reconnaissance in force and to capture this small settlement. If we increase the number of updates probably for the previous 3 weeks, we're gonna see that the Ukrainians were heavily focused in this area. They tried to destroy every single track, every single tank that were heading in direction of Andreevka. Andreevka was under very massive attack, and that recognized and discovered the Ukrainian plans that Andreevka is the main their purpose and the main their goal to attack. And after significant artillery preparation, after significant suppressing of Russian artillery forces, tank forces, armored forces, infantry supply and support, the Ukrainians launched their own offensive operation. And as a result of that offensive operation, the Ukrainians lost significant number of armored vehicles, and they were completely defeated. And basically this part of the front line was collapsed. Because the Russians started counterattacking from the south, from the east, from the west, and as a result of another Russian counteroffensive operation, the Ukrainians during these days, during this week, were forced to step back, and not just like to leave this territory. The Ukrainians were forced to step back and to cross the channel and to move on the Ukrainian side of the channel. After that, the Russians sent clearing forces, and started clearing operation, and the Russians have captured these fields, and also they sent like edge forces on the edge positions, and the Ukrainians today start publishing the videos how they were bombing, attacking, shelling the Russian reconnaissance teams that were moving along the channel, trying to discover Ukrainian positions and so on. So this is the situation. We will, if we get more updates from this area, we will update the map according to the updates we have. But currently, as I understand, the Russians recaptured their lost positions during the previous days of clashes in this area. Furthermore, a very bloody clashes continues in the vicinity of Klishchievka. The Ukrainians were left that territory because of Russian counteroffensives, and currently they're just hunting and trying to bomb and destroy the Russians inside the settlement with the drones, with artillery system and so on, and without making any attempts to use infantry to enter the settlement. So the Russians controls the most important part. The Ukrainians have their positions probably in the forest and in the northern trenches. When talking about the northern part of Yagidne, between of Artyomovsk in the vicinity of Yagidne and Berkhovka, the Ukrainians also were defeated in this area during the previous days, and the Russians launched the clearing operation. And we have the video, at least from the Ukrainian side, that the Russians managed to complete the clearing of these forest lines, and basically, according to latest update we have, these forest lines currently are under Russian control. So we need also some time to get more evidence, and then we will update the map. When talking about Donetsk area, today we got a very interesting update from Novomykhailovka. The Russians third time in a row used the Mi-24 missiles Lemur or product 305. This is the newly created Russian missile that can be launched within a distance of 15 kilometers. As a result of that attack, the Russians managed to destroy another ammo depot in this area. But this is also a very important update. We understand that the Russians continue artillery preparation, and soon they're going to attack in this to the south in direction of Novomykhailovka as well. But to understand the global picture in the vicinity of Marinka, we need to increase the number of updates, and we will understand everything. So according to these icons, we see that the red icons belongs to the Russians, and the red icons belong to the Russians, and the blue icons belong to the Ukrainians. And according to this geography of events, we understand that the main focus that Ukrainians are trying to focus their forces, the main area Ukrainians are trying to focus their forces is the central part, because this is the main logistic area, because the main logistic roads and movements of the Ukrainians are taking place in this area. And after the central part, some of the Russian forces are going to the south and some of them are going to the north. But basically, according to this geography, we see that the global Russian movement and global Russian vision is something like this: the southern direction and the northern direction. So as you can see, the Russians are trying to take this entire area something like in a pincer, and to encircle by these very global attacks from the flanks. And the main purpose, of course, is Novomikhailivka and Konstantinovka, and the northern Krasnogorovka as well. So this is the situation in Marinka. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce fightings in this area, as a result of storming operation, bombing and shellings, the Ukrainians lost 370 soldiers, 12 armored vehicles, and 2 tanks and 4 artillery systems. Now we're moving further to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. We got also a lot of very interesting updates. We got some clarifications about the past updates and so on. As we discussed, the Ukrainians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to enter the northern part of the settlement. And we got that update yesterday. Today we got more clarifications, more like confirmations of that. We got some videos and photos, and from all these photos we got from Urozhaina, there is one picture that we need to pay attention to, and I'm talking about this picture. This one, according to the geolocations, this armored vehicle of Ukrainian forces was destroyed exactly in this area. So this is like geolocated. So according to this information, we understand that Ukrainians have entered Urozhaina not just from the north. The Ukrainians, as I told you, I were expecting this operation. The Ukrainians tried to attack the Russians from the south, and they crossed the river and also entered the settlement from direction of Staromayorskaya. The Ukrainians built a pontoon bridge somewhere in this area. Probably they tried to restore or build a pontoon bridge above the old destroyed bridge, and they entered the southern part. But that was some kind of ambush because the Russians had some forces there. Maybe the Russians have some reserves from the south, and basically the forces that were attacking Urozhaina from the south were destroyed by the Russian reserves that were deployed also in the south. And most of Ukrainian armored vehicles, at least in the south, were destroyed, and those who were able to survive retreated towards Urozhaina, to Staromayorsk, to the north. So this is the situation. But when talking about the northern part, we haven't received any evidence from the Russian side that they managed to force the Ukrainians to step back. So probably the Ukrainians are currently in this area and are digging deeper, deeper into this area. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce fightings in the vicinity of Staromayorsk and Urozhaina, the Ukrainians lost 180 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 1 tank, and 4 artillery systems. So as you can see, the level of losses is very heavy. Furthermore, the Ukrainians continue attacking and bombing the Russian main supply roads that the Russians used to supply and support their garrison in the vicinity of Urozhaina. On this video, we see how the Ukrainians managed to discover Russian armored vehicle that were heading in direction of Urozhaina, probably and tried to bring some munition, probably soldiers, maybe food, maybe medicine, and that armored vehicle was destroyed as a result of drone attack, and or at least heavily damaged. Another video we got from Staromlinovka, the same situation. The Ukrainians are trying to hunt and trying to get the Russian positions, and as soon as they do this, they start bombing and shelling this area with drones, with artillery systems. On this video, we see how the Ukrainians discovered a radar, as I understand, and after that they destroyed the radar that the Russians were used for communication purposes. Anyway, they tried to reduce the Russians' capabilities in the north. Furthermore, for the previous few days we haven't received even a single video of the Ka-52 usage, so basically maybe the Russians have redeployed Ka-52 to another part of the front line. Now we're moving to Bradley Square today, to Zaporozhye area, to Orekhov front line. Today we got a lot of interesting updates. I have updated the map showing the Ukraine progress. Today the Ukrainians published the video, the Russians published the video how they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions right along this forest line, which confirms the Ukrainian progress in the direction of Verbova. And there were a lot of updates saying that Ukrainians, as a result of attacks and storming operation during the previous days, changed their focus and currently are trying to develop their bridgehead in direction of Verbova to the east from Rabotina. Basically the main Ukrainian directions of attack currently looks like this. So they're trying to attack among the fields and trying to capture the trenches in the west of Verbova. From the other side, the Russians all those days were trying to counterattack the Ukrainians in their flanks, trying to slow down the Ukrainian movements in that direction. So basically this is the Russian tactics. Furthermore, we got another video how the Ukrainians were bombing the Russians in the vicinity of these forest lines. We used this video just to geolocate the combat line and to geolocate the Russian positions on the north of Verbova. So this is the Russian positions. And furthermore, we got update that Ukrainians also changed their focus on the north, and currently they're accumulating their forces to attack from Takmachka in direction of Novopokrovka. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce fightings in this area, the Ukrainians lost 40 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles and 2 artillery systems. Also, the Russians reported that all those attacks in the vicinity of Verbova and Rabotina was implemented by the forces of 46 Air Mobile Brigade that probably was redeployed in this direction after the forces of 118th, 47th and 116th forces had significant losses. Now currently all those attacks were implemented by the 46th Air Mobile Brigade. This is all brigade that was prepared a long time ago. And when talking about Orekhov, also the Russians reported about the heavy losses among the officers. And now we're moving to the final region. We're going to talk about Kherson district. Today we got more details, more updates about the operation that took place in the vicinity of Kherson. Today we got the video. According to the author of this video, the Ukrainians claims that as a result of operation that took place in Kazachye Lopany, the Ukrainians managed to destroy 1 Russian armored vehicles with 17 soldiers on board. Furthermore, we got another video how the Ukrainians started the artillery preparation. As you can see, the Russians were saying that there was nothing happened there, just a small boat managed to land. But now we got more updates after a day or two of operation. Now we see how the Ukrainians were bombing and shelling that settlement heavily before the beginning of that landing operation. So basically something very big happened there, and now we just start receiving the evidence of those operations. But for now we haven't received a normal or reliable information whether the Ukrainians were able to force or they were destroyed in Kazachye Lagery or what. Currently, the situation is also covered with fog of war. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce fightings in this area, the Ukrainians lost 50 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. So this is the situation about the Ukraine. Also, we got some updates from Niger. Today, the authorities of Niger reported that some forces, there was like military accident on the border of that country, and that France also crossed and break the international airspace of this country. So basically the situation is getting worse every single day. Furthermore, according to also some Russian sources, the local forces started creation something like defense brigade, defense forces in Niger, trying to militarize society and to get ready before possible intervention in direction of this country. And when talking about, of course, defense forces, we know how Wagners are famous and how Wagners are experienced in training and creating such type of weapons. So probably this is also Wagner sign in this area. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.